Okay, Max, picture this.
All right, what do you got?
If your friend David, if I was starring in a movie in theaters, would you go see it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, if your mother was in a movie, would you go see it?
Yes.
How about a coworker?
Yeah, it's gonna have to be very specific on who that coworker is.
How about Glenn Powell?
It's gonna have a lot more to do with what the movie is than whether or not Glenn Powell is in it.
Ariana Grande?
Same deal, but even less so because I wasn't a huge fan of her music,
Dwayne Johnson?
bruh. Nah.
Well, it does depend, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. Let's go to the movies.
Welcome to Picture This, the podcast where we examine the weekly box office and ask, what do movie-going trends say about American culture? I'm Max, a screenwriter and son of an independent movie theater owner who has spent his whole life in love with movies.
And I'm Dave. Over the last 10 years, I've worked for a filmmaker, an agent, and at a movie studio in movie marketing. Today on Picture This, we're going to be talking about movie stars and what that even means in 2025, Max, which I think we're going to try to figure it out live on the pod.
I think what we're mostly going to do is just ask each other the questions that we don't know the answers to.
Can't wait to get into it with you, man. But first, as always, we're going to talk about the state of the biz. Let me just jump into the weekly box office. Recording this on the Sunday night before Thanksgiving, and the big news over this weekend is, of course, Wicked for Good. This is the second installation in the Wicked musical adaptation to theatrical experience. Last Thanksgiving, the first Wicked Part 1 was released over a very similar weekend and absolutely crushed at the box office, really made a huge footprint in the cultural zeitgeist. And Universal, the studio that released that, already had this one in the chamber. This was already shot, this sequel, Wicked for Good. And opening weekend, $150 million domestically. Can you believe that?
That is what it was tracking at. I know a bulk of their sales. I was reading an article like 2 months ago where it was like Wicked has done $125 million in pre-sales. No big surprise here with the absolute destruction that Wicked has wrought upon the box office. It is a larger opening than the first one. I don't know if that was expected, but I think it certainly says something about how much people liked the first one.
So 150 million domestically. It's looking like it's going to do another 75 plus internationally for a global opening weekend box office of $225-ish million, which is absolutely crushing. Though we've gone on the record of what our feelings are on Rotten Tomatoes, if we use it as any barometer, which I hate to use as a barometer, so I'm almost kicking myself for doing this, but if you look at the original Wicked, it had an 85 critic score and a very, very high audience score for the first one. This one had a much lower critic score. And yet, as if that matters, because more people are going to this. And
look, man, like we all went to see the first one, so we're gonna go see the second one. I didn't like Wicked as much as the average moviegoer did. I'm a huge fan of the Broadway show, and I just thought they added a lot of stuff to it to squeeze 2 movies out of it.
Yeah,
which has proven to be an immensely smart financial decision for them. But I just thought that made it a little bit slower. So I imagine that's probably what people are complaining about with the second one, even if they aren't directly saying that. It's like a result of doing that. But at the end of the day, like the show's still the show, the story's still the story. They cast it extremely well. The songs are still the songs. Like how bad could it possibly be?
So I did end up seeing it, Max, on Friday night, opening night. And this, we're not going to get super deep into Wicked here. My response did align pretty much with what the critical change was, which was I left the first one last year. My wife and I saw it together, and we liked it. I was legit moved by it. It got a little misty there on that last scene. And then this one, the best way I could describe it for me is that Wicked for Good is very uneven. Take the sample size of one half of this podcast here and the critics. Take it all with a grain of salt, listeners. But then compare it to the box office being greater. What I would offer is what really pushed this over the line is the marketing, and not just the marketing for this film, but the kind of the latent effects of the marketing of the last one. I think
100%.
And I think this will come up on a future pod, Max, like when we're talking about Avatar, which is a a franchise that made a ton of money, but those films have been made over the course of several years spaced between, whereas this was very calculated by Universal, where both versions of Wicked, part 1 and part 2, were shot together. It was essentially planned to be released back to back on back to back Thanksgivings, which they did. And because of the success of the first one, and that includes not just the critical acclaim, but also the fact that Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo, Galinda and Elphaba had a genuine relationship. Their press tour specifically was so warm and engaging.
It made me like both of them so much more.
Yeah.
I had rumor-based opinions on both of them beforehand, and there was something so charming about seeing their love for each other reflected on in the story and on the press tour, and just their dedication to promoting this movie. Like, they really care about this movie. It's very meaningful to them, and they know that the story has been meaningful to so many people because of the Broadway show.
Yeah.
And that they're carrying this legacy. Like, you can't pay for that. Like, you can't manufacture that, and it's certainly paying off.
Regardless of how you feel about the films, I do think the secret sauce of this is they nailed that relationship between Elphaba and Galinda. And Max, you and I were talking a little bit beforehand. Like, this press tour for this sequel was strong. I don't think it was, though, as strong as the one last year. I think Universal knew that on the first one, there's an education for people to introduce people to these two new actors. Of course, Ariana Grande, a very famous pop star before then. Cynthia Erivo,
Right.
she's a very talented Broadway star and had also been in some movies, but I think was a little bit more unknown. But I think the heavy lifting that Universal did before the last Wicked movie is actually paying still dividends for this one. There's this thing that is worth mentioning that I have heard from being on the marketing side. Friends that have worked at studios, specifically Disney and then Universal, they have, in the last, I want to say 15 or 20 years, they've started something within the marketing team. And I think I'm loosely going to call it, for Universal, I think it's called synergy, which is Max, this is why media conglomerates are so dominant in the entertainment space, because it is so beneficial to have what I have been told started with Disney many, many years ago, in that Disney eventually bought ABC. Disney owns ESPN. Disney obviously has the parks, Disneyland and Disney World. There are all these extensions and connections to the overall brand. And many, many years ago, what these marketing executives realized is like, hey, we can really capitalize on these other platforms to connect with our audience. And they found a way to exploit it. But that's why you'll see the Guardians of the Galaxy ride after the Guardians of the Galaxy movie was a success in theaters. They know that putting that in a Disneyland or a Disney World will help the brand affinity. And then I believe it started with Disney, and then Universal took over a similar approach, because Universal is owned by Comcast, and Comcast also owns all these different cable networks. So one of the other marketing outputs I saw behind Wicked for Good was Peacock just did a half-hour special, and it was hosted at the TCL Chinese Theater, and they just had like a concert with the Wicked cast, and it was just the whole cast singing to the crowd, but also like sitting and having interviews.
Like piano bar style.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool.
And I looked at it and I kind of eye rolled it, and then I watched it. It was delightful. It was so fun.
There are good ways to do these things, and there are real gross ways to do these things. I mean, this is all because of Star Wars. Like, if we go back, when Star Wars came out and they started making action figures, but it was kind of like laughed at. They're like, you want to, like, they couldn't even find a toy company that wanted to make Star Wars action figures. And then within a couple of years, there were more Star Wars action figures that on planet Earth than there were human beings.
Jeez.
So I feel like, after they saw what it could do for that, it became everything. And then I remember after Disney bought Star Wars with, their huge synergy machine, we started seeing like the R2-D2 ripoff droid, like BB-88, trying to sell me toothpaste. And it was just like, bro, this has gone too far.
I read that there were over 400 product tie-ins for this movie alone, which is just insane. And that, I think that is the power for good, but also maybe for bad of what it can do for a property. But I think it's also interesting to just reflect on those types of movie studios versus some smaller ones. Lionsgate, as an example, is not as big of a conglomerate, and therefore they have fewer options. Sony is
Right.
also a giant tech company, but not quite as big as the Universals and the Disneys of the world. So there is a real advantage to scale up.
Any other
Sure.
like highlights for the box office? I mean, I'm looking at Now You See Me had, a 56% drop. That's a pretty serious drop despite its strong opening. They're sitting at 37-ish. Where do you think it tops out?
Well, it looks
Mhm.
like this is a franchise that has had diminishing returns, different from Wicked, where part one did really great, and it looks like part two is doing even better. This looks like it's a franchise that is actually going down, which is not uncommon.
It's actually like a pretty large difference between the first one and the second one. The first one is 117 domestic. The second one was 65. And then this one, it'll probably cap out around like what, 50, 55. So it'll be kind of close to the second one.
This is also just one of those concepts that is conducive to a global audience. It's just like people doing weird magic shit, and you don't need a lot of like language or character development.
Yeah.
Comedy. You're a comedy writer. Like comedy is often becomes a very territory specific thing because comedy sensibilities are just different from around the world. Whereas like everyone knows a deck of cards and can watch the ace of spades vanish, man. like
Yeah, it is a very, I mean, it's a very visual story. And I think
yeah.
that's probably why it works so well. It's also a heist film, and like you don't need super in-depth care, like you were saying, character development for heist films because we're there for the heist. Like that's the star of the film.
Yes, and we just talked about it, how we've gone this far into mentioning this franchise and not said the phrase "big dumb movie." This is it,
Yeah, I
man.
was thinking
This is big dumb movie. Um,
that.
Now You See Me, Now You Don't. Big dumb movie, doing quite well, less well domestically, but still holding its own internationally. Predator Badlands dropped pretty hardcore that second week. Now the domestic total, it's around 76 million. Moving right along, ranking fourth, The Running Man, the big Glenn Powell vehicle, has not done well, Max. And you and I think
No, it's
this will
done
be
like
coming up later in the episode.
very badly. I
Very
think we
poorly.
can officially say.
Very poorly. Opening weekend, which was last weekend, I think it only made about 17 million. And this was a movie
Yeah.
that Paramount, the studio, threw the kitchen sink at as far as marketing dollars. Glenn Powell's face was everywhere.
Yeah.
I think they tried their best to make it a really clean and simple concept for people to engage in. And yet more people showed up domestically for the random heist cards magic movie, Now You See Me, Now You Don't, than this. And I think we'll unpack that. Going quickly through the rest of the top 10, this movie Rental Family made about $3 million, but was pretty good for a limited release. A movie called Sisu the Revenge, which was a sequel to a previously very successful movie, the first one calling Sisu. This is also sounding like a very big, dumb movie.
It is the dumbest and the biggest. Like they go so big, even with a low budget. It's a post World War II Finnish revenge story where it's essentially like a John Wick style. This guy can kill everybody and just not die type of revenge story. I saw the first one. I had an absolute blast in the theater. It is the biggest, dumbest movie you'll ever see. This one looks dumber. He's like making planes bounce off of his truck and stuff like that. It's remarkably dumb. I'm wondering if like the 1, 2, 3 of Predator, Running Man, and Sisu 2, are we seeing diminishing returns because all three of those were slammed so close together? Could Running Man have done better if it opened a different time of year? I don't know.
Are you saying our dumbness should have been spread around more than just a concentrated amount of dumb in November?
If they had done better, I would have been like, yeah, these movies all got to come out at the same time.
7 out of the 10 is this movie Regretting You. This is this romance from Paramount. This is its fifth week and it's made a total of $47 million, which is really, really good. This is another movie that had mixed reviews, very much going after the female demo and really connected. Good on Paramount for finding a hole in the market.
Yeah, it feels very much like Materialist from earlier in the year, where it's just kind of like limping along every week, making some cash. It's going to cop out around $100 million on the pretty modest budget. So they got to be pretty happy with that.
That's an interesting comp from a money perspective, but like to me, just the execution, like Materialist was done by Celine Song, it was very elevated, and this feels a little bit more. I was about to call it even romance novelty, but even that feels like giving it too much credit. It does come from a novel that had a following. I don't know, man. Like this just feels like Dupe's Materialist to me. Like not.
Yeah. It's small dumb
Yeah,
movie.
this is the Timu materialists in my head.
Yes.
Nuremberg, we talked about before, Max. It's now made a total of $11 million in 3 weeks. A bunch of young stars and Russell Crowe as, I want to say, Goebbels and the famous Nuremberg trials. World War II, so hot right now. This plus Sisu. It is always just a rich, fertile text, especially to get the male audience to go see it. I think $11 million is going to be a win for them. Then rounding out the last two, Black Phone. Max, holler at you boys, made a total of $76 million in its 6th week domestically, which is, man, good on them. Congratulations.
Yeah, they're killing it.
And rounding out number 10, this movie Sarah's Oil, which was released by MGM in another mid-level of theaters, 1,300 theaters. This is its 3rd weekend. It's made a total of $10 million. It's gotten great reviews. It is a drama. It is about America, and frankly, it's mostly off my radar. And dramas that succeed are, I think we can count this year on one hand, what those stories are. So interesting time at the box office as always. But of course, the headline is just like Wicked dominating and probably will dominate through the holidays. Though Zootopia 2 coming into theaters might give it a challenge, Wicked will definitely be the story for the next couple of weeks. Max, tell us what's going on in the state of the biz outside of the box office.
Yeah, speaking of joy, while the Wicked press tour is going on, the new Pope came out in the Vatican and he gathered filmmakers, actors, executives, and I don't exactly understand what the purpose of this was, if it was simply for movies, but he's like, hey, you guys all need to come to the Vatican so I could tell you how awesome movies are. And then he gave this speech about how important movie theaters were. And I just wanted to read a couple of quotes from it because it is stuff that we've discussed on this podcast articulated very well. So the first quote by the Pope himself from Chicago, which I also love. He's an American Pope. Quote, one of cinema's most valuable contributions is helping audiences consider their own lives, look at the complexity of their experiences with new eyes, and examine the world as if for the first time. In doing so, they rediscover a portion of the hope that is essential for humanity to live to the fullest. I find comfort in the thought that cinema is not just moving pictures, it sets hope in motion. And I thought that was so just perfect.
An American Pope. That's great, man.
Yeah. And he had a lot to say about what cinema's up against. And we have so many different screens now and they're very distracting. And the idea of sitting in a movie theater where we all agree to sit down and just kind of focus on one thing for a prolonged period of time. He said that there's value in that. The other quote that I wanted to say in the pod was, cultural facilities such as cinemas and theaters are the beating hearts of our communities because they contribute to making them more human. If a city is alive, it is thanks in part to its cultural spaces. So I love that we're having a spiritual leader really embrace the idea of shared common cultural spaces and how important those are when we are often so locked up behind our phones and in our own little worlds and stuff like that.
Let's get the Pope on the pod.
Let's get the Pope on the pod, Dave. Well said.
We got some work to do. It's us and the Pope, and it's us, Tom Cruise, and the Pope, just pushing people back into the theaters.
Man, Tom had a speech this week that was equally awesome. That we'll just share it on our Instagram and stuff like that. It was really great.
Making movies isn't what I do; it's who I am. What a great quote.
I think we should just get right into talking about what is a movie star. Okay, Dave. So let's just kind of give the qualities here, the criteria for what makes an actor a movie star as opposed to just a well-known name or a well-known face.
Usually a movie star was someone that was particularly handsome or pretty. They had some acting ability, but they didn't have to be an amazing actor to be a movie star. Right. But they couldn't be a downright bad actor. They had to be okay. They oftentimes had big heads, and I know that's a funny thing to say, but usually their heads were outsized. But I think those random, very specific criteria lead to the last line, which I think was the most compelling one-liner that I grew up with, which is a movie star was someone that can hold the frame, which meant when you're watching them on a movie screen, they might not even be talking, but you found yourself, for whatever reason, wanting to watch them to see what they're going to do. Max, what about you? What are the things that you think of when you try to define what a movie star is?
So yeah, I'm going to start off just by 100% agreeing with you and just kind of highlighting, I think, why. It's a visual medium, and movie stars are the people that we just want to look at the most. And it could be for a number of reasons. It could be just
Yeah.
they're purely beautiful, or their face is abnormally symmetrical. We all think of the human face as being symmetrical because we've seen so many photos of symmetrical people, but it's not. But
Yeah.
movie stars also have that like charisma where people want to start like emulating them because they are leads.
Hmm.
They're not the minor characters in the story. They are the most important people in the story. And it kind of makes us want to feel like the most important people in our own stories. And we see minor and major examples of this, like Steve McQueen when he did his motorcycle jump in The Great Escape, suddenly motorcycles like sales increased all over the world.
Yeah.
Or when Arnold Schwarzenegger popped onto the scene, he led a whole generation into just having extremely massive biceps.
Yeah. He created
Even
the gym movement just because of how compelling he was. Yeah.
Yeah, in a major way. To a lesser extent, I remember when Charlize Theron was in Fury Road, she shaved her head, and suddenly, like, women all across the country were given the shave.
Yeah.
They're taking that out for a spin.
Yeah, there's something, I think, to your point, Max, there's something aspirational about a movie star. It does feel like it's a cycle that we created when this medium got started, but we want to watch these people more than another person, so we're gravitating towards them. Then they are put in the center of the movie, and
Yeah,
therefore we want to emulate how those aspirational people are acting.
yeah. We want to act like the people who are the center of a story act, so that
Yeah.
we can be the center of the story. They're like a specific type of celebrity because celebrities before movie stars would be like Amelia Earhart, for example, was a
Hmm.
celebrity for one thing. She flew
Her
planes
flight.
around the world. Or like Teddy Roosevelt was a celebrity because he was president, sure, but he was also had this like adventurous spirit. So we used to
Yeah.
like admire adventurers or like generals or people who did one thing really exceptionally. When you're a movie star, you have a huge advantage because you get to be that exceptional person 50, 60 times in your career. So you could be an adventurer, you could be a war hero, you could be a famous attorney, you could be this, you could be that. So suddenly you become like a supercharged form of celebrity.
Yeah.
And as a result, I think up until the modern era, what really made a movie star was the person who could like embody or represent the like agreed upon set of values in a culture. And I think Tom Hanks, like that's why he's such a big deal. He really just embodies the aspirational aspects of America, like the pursuit of justice, the silliness, kindness toward his fellow citizens, and like all this stuff that we really wish America was. And that's like why Tom Hanks is America's dad and kind
Totally.
of has been since he was a young guy.
This is an interesting example for people that are younger than us, Max, because nowadays Johnny Depp has a pretty terrible reputation for things that he's done in real life. But for a
Mm-hmm.
really long time, he was a huge movie star in a very different way from someone like
Very
Tom
different way.
Hanks, though. But like we made him famous for, frankly, how weird he was. He, like,
Yeah.
he was Captain Jack Sparrow for 20 years through the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise, even so much that like we were willing to go see him in Willy Wonka and then Chocolate Factory as another real weirdo. Like I think it helps define how elusive the definition of a movie star is.
I think the reason for that is like it's a pagan belief system, right?
Oh, that's, dude, yes.
Your mythology is split up into a pantheon. So you have things like the trickster gods. So that's a comedy star. That's like a
Yeah.
Jim Carrey or a Bill Murray or a Jerry Lee Lewis from way back then when. And then you have your guys like Hanks who represent all that's good. And then you have a Julia Roberts who
Yeah.
represents like romance at times, but also, when she plays someone like Aaron Brockovich, like this pursuit of justice and stuff like that. You have your old guard, like an Alec Guinness in Star Wars when he plays
Hmm.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. He's like the sage wisdom, so it's
Yeah.
like
Zeus. Yeah.
it's interesting because there are a lot of different ways to represent the values of your culture, but there's still only so many ways at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, God, like I want to briefly go through the history of Hollywood quickly and what movie stardom has meant through different eras. The motion picture came around the turn of the century, but really Hollywood studios started in the 20s, call it. Stars like Charlie Chaplin came to success because their physicality was so interesting. And then what is it, 1928, 1929, The Jazz Singer and the creation of the talkies, where movies were a new medium, but it was in silence before that time. So movie stardom was all about looks and was all about
Yeah.
physicality.
And it was, I think, people who came out of vaudeville and came out of the theater, so it was very like, here, here's how my body moves, and then suddenly it
Exactly.
had to be about what you sound like and what you say. In this era in particular, like, it probably helped if you could sing, because they
Yeah.
started to make a lot of musicals as soon as like sound started to roll through.
Cutting way ahead is into those 60s and 70s, and frankly what Marlon Brando, as well as kind of James Dean Montgomery Cliff, they introduced another form of like the acting, which again is not the same as Stardom, but they brought a very like insular and emotional way to approach like the acting part of it, where there was something before that time that was like very performative and very like um English in its presentation.
Yeah, yeah. It was a movement that came out of the theater scene and came out of, I think, even some of like the things that were being written in 10 years prior, was to just be more real.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily projecting and making these big movements and stuff like that. You're just kind of actually doing what an actual human being would do in this moment. And it's so weird to say that that was transformative at the time, but it was very transformative at the time. So you
Totally, yeah.
had to, I mean, you still had to be gorgeous, like, but like, in a way, like Paul Newman, you're like, oh, he kind of looks like that guy that I know. It's a little bit more of an everyman type of familiarity
Yeah.
to movie stars.
Yeah, and again, we're dancing around the timeline. This is by no means an official timeline of all movie stardom, but like I think that's an interesting chapter in how like the acting actually then informed who the movie stars were. We as a society were interested in being a little less polished, a little less, a little bit more vulnerable, and then suddenly a guy like Dustin Hoffman, like a schnebby looking dude, like becomes a movie star in the 70s. And I think, if you had asked anyone in the 50s or the 40s and you just put up a photo of Dustin Hoffman, they'd be like, absolutely not.
Do the Graduate, if you adjust it for inflation, the adjusted gross would be something like $850 million in a time period where like the US population was half of what it is now. That's fucking bananas. Anyhow, in the 80s and 90s, after this like extreme auteur era and this big shift, when we saw things like Star Wars and Jaws make an insane amount of money, the studios, that's when they started to really like corporatize and become what they became today. I mean, Dave, you'd probably say that's like the beginning of that, right?
Yeah, I agree. Also, an interesting snapshot with celebrity and movie stardom. It actually kicks back a little, like pretty strongly away from the Hoffman world, and in the '80s, especially, the movie stars that define that era are people like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then I think it's an era, Max, where like you and I are kind of becoming sentient around the time in the '90s, and I think as much defined what my earlier definition of a movie star would be Arnold and Sylvester Stallone with their big heads and yes, pretty handsome.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. The 80s also saw another thing that was really important, which was home video.
mm,
And so the number of movies that were made and the number of people who saw those movies increased greatly. If you look at the knockoff Arnolds and Stallones, you get guys like Dolph Lundgren, who were pretty much straight to video stars who may have starred in movies that came out theatrically, but they were extremely profitable because they had loyal followings that were just on video. So I think the breadth of the movie star actually expanded pretty greatly in the 80s, and even more so in the 90s, when like Miramax and and the independent film movement really exploded. And you get that's the reason why we got Johnny Depp, because suddenly there was a lot of room to be weird.
I also think, Max, you're like you bring up such an interesting point about the home video market, and I think it's relevant for where we are in 2025. Is like, but that was the first time that we could hang out with movie stars on a more regular basis on our own. We could buy that
Yeah.
VHS, and if we loved ET Extraterrestrial, we could watch that 5 times a day and hang out with ET. ET maybe not the best example because it's not
Not the
really a
best
big,
movie star example.
but you could buy Rocky. You could buy these characters that you maybe previously only saw twice in a movie theater, and now you could buy them and get to be exposed to them and their greatness and their magnetism on your own time. And I think that's a real interesting marker for where we are today.
I'm going to give a little bit of data before we get into the modern era,
Yeah,
and that's like 2000 on to now. So the other thing that really defines a movie star is just the percentage of people going to the movies, right? Like how
yeah,
important were movies in American culture? And if you look at the silent era, all the way up to the advent of television. Before 1920, it was like 65 million people a week.
Wow.
At its peak, and this was like from 1920 to like 1950, there were something like 90 million people going to the movies every single week. And this was a
Max,
time
we used to be a country, Max.
we
What
used to be a
happened?
country. This was a time when there was only 125 to 150 million people in the United States. So what it
And
meant was everybody was going to the movies all the time. There were movie theaters in small towns. There were movie theaters in big cities. People were buying anywhere from 25 to 36 movie tickets a year. That's almost every week, right?
mm-hmm.
So that changed obviously when television came into the home. Again, these statistics are not super accurate. They're cobbled together by some sources that are like, well, we don't really know, but here's what our estimates are. But
Yeah.
it seems like that number dropped during the 50s, like in half. It goes from like
Okay.
30 tickets to about 15 tickets a year. And then by the time the 1960s roll around, and what's interesting is that this is a low point, like 3 to 5 tickets a year.
Whoa, that's way
And that
lower than I thought.
increases in the 70s and 80s and 90s. It goes, in the 80s you're like at 4 or 5. In the 90s it's like, 5 or 6. And in the 2000s around 5, which is still not like super remarkable. But it's interesting to me that 1960 to 1969 were so low. Do you have any
Mm-hmm.
guesses as to why that is, Dave?
I don't.
Again, very brief overview of movie history then. Big musical, which was invented in like the 30s, was kind of reaching its zenith, and people were fucking tired of it. There were these
Mm.
really big, dopey, huge productions, big Hollywood movies like Cleopatra, these massive historical epics that were like 3.5, 4 hours long. That's what like movie studios were trying to make. And audiences just got sick of them, and they got expensive, and then they tanked. And that's part of what made like the late 60s through the 70s era so interesting, is because people were like, we just have to make different types of movies in order for folks to come out. So like when The Graduate came out in 1969 and it made today's equivalent of $850 million, people were like, why the hell are we making Dr. Dolittle? This like really stupid movie that doesn't make any sense with bad songs in it. If we're going to lose money on that when we can make a ton of cash with these small young movie stars who are exciting and interesting and have a different set of cultural values. So I bring that up because I feel like today we are in an era of a lot of big, dumb, expensive movies and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of corporate driven storytelling that feels very much the same. Because in the last 5 years, I mean, not really accounting for COVID, but if the low point in the first 100 years of cinema was around 3 to 5 movie tickets a year, in 2023, that tickets per person compared to the US population is at 2.5 and dropping.
So depressing. From
So,
25 tickets, movie tickets a year, 30 movie tickets a year, about 100 years
yeah.
ago, to 2.5.
Yeah. So during the 2000s and, the 20 teens or whatever we're calling them, the movie star dynamic changes, right, Dave? Because that's when we enter the era of the sequel and the cinematic universe and the prequel and the reboot and all this other stuff. And suddenly the property becomes more about whether it's a Batman movie as opposed to whether or not it's Michael Keaton as Batman or Val Kilmer as Batman or George Clooney as Batman, right?
Yeah. I think, Max, I think specifically in the 90s, there was a healthy balance of movie stars using their equity to get movies made and to make interesting choices.
I mean, there's that George Clooney quote where he was like, I do, what is it, like 2 for them, 1 for me. And so in order to keep the star of Ocean's 11 happy so they could do Ocean's 12, they'll let him make Good Night and Good Luck.
That balance, most people in the industry kind of heeded that as a great North Star. And that allowed the ecosystem of like, okay, we understand we need to make certain movies that appeal to a very broad audience and then make a lot of money for said entertainment conglomerates in order for them to allow me to make these smaller films. But then I think the unspoken thing was some of those smaller movies would actually succeed.
Yeah.
Because of great artists working together, sometimes magic happened. Sometimes it didn't. Sometimes you would make a movie like Monuments Men, and it
I
would
still
make
stand for that movie. I know people hate on it, but like, I'm all
Sorry,
about that flick.
shots fired. But I think referencing George is a really interesting comp for, I think, what is now I would consider an older version of a movie star. That balance, one for them, one for me, was a real cornerstone of what Hollywood was. I want to say up until, what are you saying, 2015, maybe all the way up until COVID, but maybe even before COVID.
I think it was before COVID. I think
Yeah.
2015 is probably a pretty good call. I mean, what killed it was social media, and also just like movie budgets running completely out of control. Even those small movies now seem very expensive. Not to point fingers at Leonardo DiCaprio about a movie that I liked, but like Killers of the Flower Moon being like a $200 million movie, and it was just like, good on Apple for just cutting the check to Marty Scorsese, and good at all those people for wanting to make that movie. But the Good Night and Good Luck model was, I mean, that movie was like a $9 million movie. It made much more sense to have that kind of exchange. Not that it should always be that way, but yeah, you're right. It was around 2015 because it's also when like streaming really started to take off, and it really kind of put the nail in the coffin for the DVD extra revenue. And also just people seemed to care less about movie stars. But I don't know, to like, the reason I brought up Play Dirty is because I don't know if it's like people are watching movies less. We know they're going to theaters less, but are they watching movies less? And is it the fact that maybe the quality of these streaming movies aren't as effectual in our culture, that the movie star is less culturally important, but still really important if you want to make a movie, which maybe the same amount of people are still watching? I don't know, Dave. Like, what do you?
Yeah,
What's your take on like the modern state of movie celebrity?
So, okay, we're in 2025. And I think the reason we all did this episode is just the last couple of months, especially, there have been a lot of executions of theatrical movies that you could see on a piece of paper why a studio executive from 2015 would green light that movie, and it did not fucking work. One of those examples is Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, in The Smashing Machine, and taking a swing at something outside of his comfort zone. Dwayne very much is a brand. He literally has a pseudonym name through his whole career of The Rock. And he has clearly been a bankable movie star. Again, to my first criteria, Max, giant head, huge head.
Well, his head used to be bigger until his muscles just kept getting bigger.
But I'll rattle off what has kind of sparked this. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, starring in The Smashing Machine, which was, a more modested budgeted step outside of his normal movie stardom. People didn't show up for it. Margot Robbie and Colin Farrell, literally at the time of putting this package together, the girl who was Barbie and made $1 billion, and Colin Farrell, who's had a lot of love over the last couple of years on all types of performances, including The Penguin. No one went to go see it. Their movie Big Bold Beautiful Journey opened to $4 million.
Wild.
Crazy. Emma Stone in Begonia, again, she just won the Academy Award. She is just loved and lauded. Hollywood fancy people think she's amazing. I think everyday moviegoers think she's like lovely and funny. She was in a very like interesting, challenging movie called Begonia, which people didn't really go see it. Robert Pattinson, after he's fucking Batman in a movie, does his next movie with the guy who directed the Academy Award winning Parasite.
Right.
That movie, Mickey 17, even his star power could not really open that movie. Just this past couple, weekends, I think what really nailed it is what many people think of as a rising star. This guy, Glenn Powell, who was, again, the third lead in Top Gun Maverick, has been in the Twisters movie, and has made no shame about saying, I want to be a movie star. I want to follow in the steps of people like Tom Cruise and Tom Hanks and those people. And he's doing all the work that you would expect a movie star from that previous era to do, and that movie underperforms. So it's got everyone scratching their heads in the industry of like, how do you even make a successful movie? If you even can get someone who's considered a movie star into it, that doesn't necessarily guarantee people are going to show up. The last example I will say, Max, is one that we've talked about often on this podcast, is Leonardo DiCaprio in One Battle After Another. Leo is considered maybe the last great movie star, and even that, people are saying probably underperformed. Max, after I lay that out, what do you think?
Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to list a couple of counter arguments.
Go.
Michael B. Jordan delivered.
But he was two of himself.
I don't accept that counter argument.
Okay, you go.
Michael B. Jordan delivers. Jason Momoa and Jack Black deliver bigly.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt delivers with F1. It seems like it eked out profits largely due to international sales, but I don't think you can say that like somebody who carries a movie to $180 million domestically is not a movie star, and that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Same with Tom Cruise. Mission Impossible, an impossibly stupidly expensive film, but $195 million worth of tickets sold. Even less so, Liam Neeson in Naked Gun. Not a hugely successful film, but a dead genre. Largely marketed on the fact that he was doing it. That movie, it performed pretty well relative to like, you know, how badly other comedies performed this summer.
Yeah.
Jason Statham makes terrible films. I mean, A Working Man is terrible. Beekeeper was terrible, but actually fun. But his films are making money, right? These are all people who like have delivered. And then there's some questionable, like Scarlett Johansson, who did Jurassic Park this summer. Was it successful because she was in it? Was it successful because it was a Jurassic Park film? I think she's a big star and she's super helped. Pedro Pascal has had a very interesting summer. Fantastic Four, again, might have lost money, but we're still talking about $250 million worth of tickets.
Yeah.
Eddington sank. I finally started watching it. I think it's fucking really good, but I don't think you blame that on him. That's one of the hardest movies I've ever watched in my life. It's so painful to watch that.
Yeah.
But Materialists was a hit, right?
Yeah. Can I counter your counter?
Sure.
Taking a step back, growing up in the 90s, people saw a movie like Jerry Maguire, not because they knew what the movie was about. It was just Tom Cruise's movie. Or we're going to see the latest Arnold action movie. We're going to see the latest Julia Roberts rom-com.
Yeah.
Now cut to now. Do you think people said, I'm going to see the Michael B. Jordan movie? Or do you think people went to go see, I'm going to see the vampire scary movie that has really good reviews?
I think if you take Michael B. Jordan out of that movie, it opens a lot smaller and it gains a lot less traction.
And I will agree with you that, like, I think his performance in that is actually very underrated. Like, he's incredible in it. But
I feel like him being in it is a catalyst. Like, it is absolutely quintessential.
Yeah.
Absolutely quintessential. It is not quite the level of, oh, what's that new Tom Cruise movie, Jerry Maguire? Oh, I'll go see that. I love Tom Cruise. I don't think it's quite that level, but I do think it's a lot closer than people give it credit for.
Yeah, I think I'm stealing a phrase from a journalist that I like, so apologies for this. But I think the idea of having season tickets to a movie star, for just saying like whatever this movie star is in, I will go see. I think it's very rare for general audience goers in movies to have season tickets to anyone anymore. And I think that, not including Max, people like you and me, I think you and I will just show up for an actor that we love or a director that we love. But I think most people, this is the comment on today's celebrity, is that like, just because Leo is in it doesn't guarantee that everyone's going to show up.
Yeah. I mean, my counter argument to Leo, I think, remains like he still sold a lot of tickets for that type of movie. He sold more tickets to that than Emma Stone sold to Begonia. You know what I mean?
Dude, yes. But if I'm going to be,
he should still take a pay cut. He still needs to do the Tom Brady and take a pay cut. But I don't want to catastrophize like the lack of movie stars or the lack of importance of movie stars. I think they're still a quintessential part of filmmaking. When I think of Glenn Powell and like the chatter that's going on around him being like, well, I guess he's not a movie star now. He's only had 2 hits, a hit TV show, and then 1 movie that tanked. And turns out that movie that tanked is actually not very good. Yeah. So it's like, for the movie to not be good and be like, well, I guess Glenn Powell's not a movie star, is not really an argument against Glenn Powell not being a movie star. It has to do with the fact that people saw that trailer and went like, that movie doesn't look good. I don't think I'm going to go see it. I only buy 3 movie tickets a year.
Yeah.
You know, and like also I chose to go to Predator Badlands instead of that, and you know, or whatever. We don't know what that is.
Yeah.
It's interesting talking about Glenn Powell, because when Julia Roberts was in the 90s, I mean, speaking of like the one for them, the one for me model, she kind of did like 4 or 5 rom-coms, and then she did Eric Brockovich.
Yeah.
And then she did 2 or 3 rom-coms and then did something else. And I feel like, I don't know if it's because of the studios or because of the agents or just because of the way development works now, but you used to develop things around stars. And
Mm-hmm.
we're developing things around properties now.
Yeah. I guess my bold statement of in 2025 is that movie stars alone can't make a successful movie. I think you need a movie star and a concept that's compelling and
Yeah.
marketable.
Like the Sinners example is like you need to create that kind of chatter. Oh, it's this and it's this and it's the music and it's that. But I also think like it would behoove a studio to take a guy like Glenn Powell and take a star like Sydney Sweeney, or after the success of Anyone But You, and be like, we're going to make 3 more rom coms with both of you, not necessarily together.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to make you a rom com star. And instead, you have Glenn Powell do Anyone But You and Twisters and Running Man. Now, those are probably all pretty close together in development and when they were booked and all that stuff. So that's not to say that people made a calculated mistake, but I do feel like we're forgetting these movie stars, like celebrity in general, do represent a particular place in the pantheon of our mythology.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, a result out of other stuff that came out of social media in 2015, stuff that has been very good for our culture about limit the types of roles that women get cast in versus the type of roles that men get cast in, and the dearth of lead roles for
Mm-hmm.
Black movie stars, or especially Latino movie stars. And people don't want to get stereotyped or typecast or whatever anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that's a good thing, but it's also like when you're building your brand as a movie star and you're building your power as a movie star and you're building your audience and you're trying to create an audience that's going to loyally show up to your movies, I think you do need to like
Help
I
define
feel
that. Yeah.
yeah.
What that lane is. Okay. In this example that we're talking about of like the rise of the concept driven film and concept being as important, or I would maybe argue more important than the star. So Wicked just crushed again. Do you think Ariana and Cynthia gave their star equity to Wicked and helped? Or do you think Wicked, the property, the concept, the IP, helped the celebrity of Ariana and Cynthia?
I mean, to a certain extent, both, but I think Ariana lending her celebrity to Wicked helped generate curiosity. It helped generate a conversation about the movie. I think she helped that movie a lot.
I see.
I
I think it's the other way. I think the concept helped her ultimately. Like I
It
think she's going to come
definitely
out.
helped
Yeah,
her.
yeah,
Yeah. She now has so many more doors open to her. She could do a bunch of big movies. She could do a smaller movie in
yeah,
a way that like she was not nobody thought of her as an actress really before. And I know she came out of Disney.
yeah. She was always liked, but like Wicked, I think people went to Wicked, and again, I still applaud the people that put the movie together and got the great ingredients of Ariana and Cynthia because
Yeah.
they're great themselves. They're fantastic together. But like, dude, I think like they are leveraging the love that Wicked is getting across the country now, across the world. And I agree. I think Ariana can do. She's gonna have all the doors, and Cynthia should have all the doors open because of this success. And this is an example where like the property then helps create them as movie stars.
Yeah, but I don't know like how long that road is, right?
Yeah.
Like if Ariana went and did her version of the Smashing Machine and it didn't
Yeah.
perform,
Yeah.
like what's next? So if the two of them, like in old Hollywood, the two of them would be like, you guys are going to make 5 more musicals together.
Yeah. I want to bring Leo back up because I think to me he was such a formative movie star, and we've seen this great progression in his career. And everyone that is in my circle views his career navigation as successful as you can be.
It's really good.
Yeah,
But I was
and
just looking at his filmography and
yeah,
he did do, he would do like Shutter Island and then he would do Revolutionary Road and he worked with the best directors and he tried to find the best material. It didn't always work out, but like it's hard to be like who did it better than Leo.
who did it better than Leo? He's never done TV.
Well, since Growing Pains.
Since
But yes.
since Growing Pains, he has a social media handle, but is very, very cautious on what he posts. He mostly posts for his efforts towards climate change and philanthropic efforts. And that's a very specific model of how a movie star manages his life. And I think I want to bring that up into what I have heard other people brought up a similar comp to a younger version of Leo, and that is Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah.
sports term, like most people think Timmy is a 5-tool player, that he can do pretty much anything. In a similar vein to Leo, he's got the heartthrob thing, he's got the acting chops, he's got the charisma on a red carpet, he looks good in a suit. He wants to do things that are artistic and different and bold. But he has had a different approach just in the last couple of years in how he manages celebrity. He is very present and prevalent on social media and uses that as a real tool to connect with his audiences. That is way different from the Leo model.
How would you describe his presence on social media? Because I've seen a couple of the promos for Marty Supreme, which is, for me, I'm like, why does this movie exist? I can't believe it exists. He's playing, is it a make-believe ping pong star?
No, I think it's based on a true story. But I guess Timothy's willingness to post on social media, it includes his relation to like fashion, and he does a lot of things that are even outside the vertical of just movie stardom. I'm not saying he's like doing TV campaigns, but like he is willing to post and make himself not scarce. The way that I think Leo and certain old movie stars specialized in saying, hey, you're not going to get so much of me on a television show or a commercial, you're going to have to pay the $20 to go to a movie theater and see me on the big screen. But what I think is interesting, especially right now in this moment, is the Marty Supreme marketing stuff that you mentioned, Max. It's a tough movie to pitch. It's a movie that's pretty much without one of these big concepts that feels so necessary to a movie star nowadays. It's an aspiring ping pong player who wants to bring greatness to the sport. But the marketing for him has all been around him and his own celebrity. This week, an 18-minute video was posted to his social channels where he gets on the phone with other movie marketers and they have a brainstorm in how to promote Marty Supreme. It's a full-on farce. It is a joke of how these meetings go. I hate to break it to people that think this is a real thing. He pitches these movie executives ideas on how to promote Marty Supreme, and they're all crazy and weird. One of his crazy ideas ends with the idea of creating a blimp, like the Goodyear blimp, making it orange and putting the words Marty Supreme on it. And on the video, you clearly see all the marketing execs kind of look on it as in horror, like it's just a terrible idea, which it is a terrible idea. Because what does that mean? I don't know. And then cut to the fact that A24, just this past weekend, actually did it. They painted a blimp orange and they put Marty Supreme and they floated it around Southern California. And the meta joke for that has gotten a lot of attention online. So it's a very weird approach and something I'm fascinated with just because I've worked in and around movie marketing. I think what will be interesting, Max, though, is this movie comes out in a month. I'm pretty sure that there are going to be more unusual stunts around this movie leading up to it. Yeah. I'm fascinated to see if people actually show up for this movie on Christmas Day, or if this is just something that people are going to like and subscribe online.
Bro, if people show up and if this movie is very successful, marketing is going to become absolute chaos. I'm not even saying it's a bad thing, but everybody's going to try and steal from it. Everybody's going to try to emulate it in their own way, because what it's really going to prove is it's like the whole all we got to do is get people's attention thing. And then I think it's not going to work a bunch and people are going to go back and try and do the Predator thing, which we talked about how successful that was. Can't we just say what it is?
I think you said the funny word now about social media, Max. Social media is just built around attention and how you can get it. And that comes in various sad forms of how our human brains are wired, which is fear and hate, or extreme love and obsession. And those are the things that we gravitate towards most as just base humans. Timmy seems to really master that attention button. It will be interesting, though, if that level of attention on social media will actually translate to box office success.
Yeah, Dave, as a guy who works in marketing, because I've talked to a lot of people, writer, director friends in development, and a particular friend of mine, like when YouTube got into making original content and he was forced to cast an entire series that they barely paid him for with specifically YouTube influencers that had like huge followings. And it didn't translate. People didn't want to watch those people doing anything other than whatever they're famous for on their channels. And I know it's a little different because you're talking about Chalamet, who has like 19 million Instagram followers for being an actor. But are those people showing up? Like, how is it translating? I really don't have a good grip on it.
There's always this question in what we've talked about as show business of like, okay, how do we get people to see it? How do we convince them? How do we dupe them? How do we sell them? All those very, very businessy, gross words. And I think it's hard to deny that there is some value in it. Like I do have
Right.
friends that my heart breaks where they're like, hey, I had this great actor who graduated Juilliard and was going to be perfect for my small movie, but they made me cast an influencer because he has 5 million followers. So I really feel for the artists that are trying to put stuff together, but I would be remiss in saying like, how is someone going to see your small movie and you don't have, a media buy? Like ultimately now these followers on these platforms are guaranteed ways that you can get eyeballs on your product.
But is it a guaranteed way to get those eyeballs to leave their house and go to the movie theater?
Well,
Or
there is.
even put it on their TV?
That's a good question. It is a difference between awareness and conversion. And that's another tough part of the marketing job is like, just because you get the eyeballs, it doesn't mean you can convince them to go see it. And I think that'll be the big question about Marty Supreme is like Timothy and his weirdness, kookiness, and his followers of, what did you say, Max? I haven't even looked at it, but call it 20 million followers on
Yeah, it's about
Instagram.
20.
Okay. $20 million on Instagram for one person. Do you know what the ratings were for the Oscars this year? It was less than
11?
20. Yeah, it was less than 20
Yeah.
million. I think it was like 17 and that was a good year, something like that. And you have one person that has that many people that is willing to want to see your content. Then there's the question, to your point, Max, of conversion is like, once you get the eyeballs, is like, can you say the compelling thing to get them to go see it? And I don't know,
Michael B.
man.
Jordan,
Michael B. Jordan.
25,
Maybe that's what it was.
25 million Instagram followers.
And maybe that was a huge help for Sinners. Maybe the fact that he was able to show his audience this vampire movie called Sinners, that's why people went to go see it. So I think now it's a sad evolution for people my age, but maybe younger people won't feel that it's sad. But I think being a movie star, your social media following has to be a consideration. It breaks my heart to say that, but I think it has to be a consideration of if you are.
I think what we might learn is if you are an actor with a large social media following, that means a lot. But if you're just some fucking influencer, people don't necessarily want to see you go act.
That's a great point. Yeah, they have 20 million followers, 25 million followers, whatever. They don't want to maybe go see him in a movie. I don't know.
Well, looking at all the data and all of our assumptions and all of our questions, Dave, I mean, what do you think? Do you have a solution on what makes a movie star here?
No, man, I think we probably made it worse.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I think that's how I feel coming out of this conversation is I know less about, I know that putting a movie star in a movie is important. I just don't know how or why. And I don't envy the people that have to make those decisions. So,
but I'm excited to talk Marty Supreme in the new year and to see.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. What are you excited to see next week?
This movie Hamnet, which was in the film festivals at the beginning of the fall, not a misspelling of Hamlet, but it is another movie called Hamnet, getting great reviews. I'm excited to see that. What about you, Max? What are you excited to see?
I'm super excited to talk about all of our fall previews. I have to try and see a couple more movies that we haven't seen. I got to see House of Dynamite, and I am committed to going to see the new Knives Out movie at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood. This will be the fifth Netflix movie that I've seen in theaters and then not watched on their app at all. So I don't know how that makes them feel, but I saw Frankenstein and some other movies. So that's what's on my docket, Dave.
That's plenty, man. I can't wait till next time. Holidays are upon us. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's time. It's Thanksgiving weekend, so there's only one thing for us to do, and that's just see you at the movies.
See you at the movies.